The general, who's played by odd choice, but it's Nick Nolte. His name is General Romeo Dallaire. He's a Quebecois Canadian. He knew, he'd found out through sources among Hutu Democrats and others, exactly the date that the Hutu massacre of the Tutsi and the Hutu Democrats was going to occur, where the assembly points were, which churches and pulpits, and which radio stations and so would be used to call people to the assembly points and dish out the machetes and all of this. Not just machetes, by the way, that's a cliche about Africa. These were fragmentation weapons as well, on which Rwanda had spent most of its budget for genocide. He said, he called up the UN, he said, we have a very small mission here, but we know what's about to happen. If we tell the government what we know, and if meanwhile we double the size of the UN force from, say, 250 to 500, we have a chance of putting them off doing it. They might wonder if they were going to get away with it. Those faxes, which I've read, landed on the desk of Kofi Annan, who threw them away. Mr. Clinton instructed Ambassador Madeleine Albright, as she then was, to veto the resolution that was put into the UN by the Czech Republic, calling for a strengthened UN force and a warning to the Rwandan genocide regime. It was vetoed by the United States. Then supported a French intervention, military intervention, which was on the side of the genocide forces. I mean, I could go on about this. In May of 2003, if Saddam Hussein had still been in power, guess what government would have been the chair of the United Nations Special Committee on Disarmament? Iraq. Saddam Hussein would have been appointed the chairman of that, as Libya had appointed the chair of the Human Rights Commission. It's gone too far. They let down Bosnia, they betrayed Bosnia. They betrayed Rwanda, they betrayed Somalia, they abandoned Iraq. And the countries with extreme self-interest in these situations are allowed to veto efforts at rescue. So the best UN people that I know believe two things, basically, if you want to think about reform at all. It's a very long subject, but first, that the permanent 5 members of the Security Council, that's the coalition of the willing, the countries that declared war on the Axis, which could veto the membership of any country that didn't join, didn't declare war, which is why Spain, for example, wasn't allowed to join the UN until the 50s, or Ireland, because they hadn't declared war on Hitler. And this permanent 5 is a farce now, because it used to be basically Taiwan, the US, Britain, Russia, and France. It should be expanded at least by 2 members. I would say India would be the most obvious one, a democratic, pluralist, secular, multi-ethnic country with a huge economy and a great civilization. And either, I would say, South Africa or Brazil. Don't know. But one of those, at least 2 of those 3, and a veto should require 2 votes, not 1. No one country should be able to veto all the other. That on its own would be a great thing. As it happens, though, in my opinion, the United States is the only one that represents the unspoken for. But only the United States ever gets called unilateralist. I mean, the day I read the word unilateralist in the same sentence as the word Chirac in the New York Times will be an interesting day, but I don't expect ever to see this. And France bombs West Africa every day without, invades Ivory Coast without even telling the UN, let alone asking. Explodes atmospheric and nuclear weapons in the Pacific, shoots and blows up Greenpeace vessels that protest about it, uncondemned, and sent a military expedition to Rwanda on the side of the genocide regime, unpunished, and is described as, but the French, the Europeans, take this more broad and general and mature view, while Mr. Bush and his people are unilateralist. Don't believe this stuff, don't be believing it. Take it from a European. There's no reason for American masochism on this point. This was to, for once it was decided, let's enforce the resolutions for a change. Let's put the offending government in the frame for a change. Let's give them a cut-off point for a change. Let's mean it for a change. And everyone grizzled and whined. They still do. This is masochism. There's no need for it.
Christopher, maybe a couple more questions. There's a gentleman to your right in the...
Even won this TV poll the other day for the greatest American president. which was a profound shock to me, but not a surprise. And so we realized how hazardous this enterprise of evaluating recent immediate history is. I think, if you asked me, I'd have to free associate somewhat. I'm a great critic of Winston Churchill, and especially of the American cult of Winston Churchill's personality, and I have an essay in Love, Poetry and War available at fine bookstores everywhere about why that is. But there's no question, when you've been through everything you can say against him, and his terrible record in India and Ireland and in the First World War and everywhere else, that there's something, if the word historical figure means anything at all, whether it's Professor Elton or